It was just past midnight when my phone lit up on the passenger seat beside me. I glanced at the screen and froze. Dad was calling. At first, I thought maybe he just wanted to check in, like he always did. But the second I answered, I knew something was wrong. His voice wasn't steady. It trembled in a way I had never heard before, not even when he used to run into burning houses for a living. He only said one thing, over and over again, like it was the only thing keeping him breathing. Don't go home. Stay where you are. Please, Emily, trust me. I asked him why, panic sharpening my voice, but he wouldn't explain. He just begged me to listen. 10 minutes later, the wail of sirens sliced through the silence of my quiet street. Red and blue lights painted the walls of my own house as police cars swarmed the neighborhood. I sat there gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white, realizing that somehow, without telling me how or why, my father had just saved me from something I never saw coming. But before I explain the nightmare that began that night, let me introduce myself. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 27 years old, and I work as a nurse at a small community hospital not far from home. I live alone in what people like to call a safe neighborhood, the kind of place where neighbors wave while mowing their lawns. Kids ride their bikes until the streetlights come on, and nobody locks their doors because, well, nothing ever happens here. Or at least, that's what I used to believe. My dad's name is Daniel. He's a retired firefighter, and he's always been the kind of father who looks at danger straight in the eye without flinching. He's protective to the point of being overbearing, the type who still calls me twice a week just to ask if I've checked the locks at night. My mom, Linda, is softer, emotional, always worrying about every little thing. My younger brother Ethan is the joker of the family, the one who knows how to lighten the mood when the rest of us are too tense. But my dad, he's different. When he says something, he means it. And he's always told me, if I ever tell you to trust me, don't question it. That night, I had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift at the hospital. I was exhausted, my body aching from head to toe, and all I could think about was collapsing into bed. As I drove through the nearly empty streets, I noticed how strangely quiet everything felt. Streetlights buzzed and flickered, the kind of flicker that made shadows stretch and shiver on the pavement. Even the air felt heavy. I didn't think much of it, at least, not until my phone rang and my father's voice shattered the silence. Don't go home, Emily. Stay where you are. His words echoed in my head as I pulled into a gas station a few blocks away. I couldn't make sense of it. Why? What was happening at my house? My mind spun with questions, but no answers came. I thought about calling Mom, but I knew she'd either panic or tell me something that would only make things worse. Every time Dad called back, his tone was sharper, more urgent. He refused to explain, only repeating the same command. Stay away, don't move until I say it's safe. And here's the thing. You have to understand the weight those words carried coming from him. This was a man who had yanked me out of a lake, seconds before lightning struck the water. A man who once stopped us from getting into a car because something felt off. Later, we found out the brakes were completely shot. Dad had always had this uncanny instinct for danger, like he could sense it before it struck. And yet, this was different. This wasn't a thunderstorm or a broken-down car. This was my home. I sat there in the dim glow of the gas station lights, my heart pounding, feeling like I was split in two. Part of me wanted to believe he was overreacting, that I'd pull up to my house and everything would be fine. But the other part of me, the part that remembered how often he'd been right before, kept whispering that this time he might be protecting me from something I couldn't even imagine. So I stayed in my car, the engine off, staring down the empty street that led to my house, and with every siren that screamed past me, every red-blue flash that cut across the sky, my chest tightened. I knew my father had never sounded that terrified in his life, which meant whatever was waiting for me at home was something far worse than I was ready to face. My reflection in the windshield didn't even look like me anymore. A pale, trembling ghost stared back, her eyes wide and glassy with fear. I had spent years working in a hospital, treating patients who stumbled in at their most fragile, moments from death, but I had never imagined that one night I'd be the one feeling that same raw panic. This was different. This was personal. This was my life, dangling on a thread I couldn't see. My phone buzzed again, vibrating against the console like it was alive. I snatched it up with shaking hands. "Dad," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You're scaring me. Please, just tell me what's going on." There was a pause, a silence so sharp it felt like the whole world had stopped to listen. Then his voice returned, quiet but unshakably firm. "Emily, if you go into that house tonight, I don't know if I'll ever see you again. Stay put. The police are on their way." My stomach dropped. My house, my safe place. The one place I thought nothing could touch me. I turned in my seat, looking back down the street I had lived on for years. It looked exactly the same, calm, ordinary, the kind of place you wouldn't think twice about. But the way Dad spoke, it was as if a shadow was already waiting inside, patient, dangerous, watching. Minutes stretched into eternity. Every little noise in the night made me jolt. The electric hum of the gas station sign above me, the distant bark of a dog, the sluggish sweep of headlights gliding past. It all felt wrong, amplified, suffocating. My mind raced with the urge to leave my car, to walk closer, to peek just once at what was happening. But then I'd hear it again in my head, my father's voice cracking with fear. That wasn't a sound I could ignore. And then, faint at first, I heard them. Sirens. The sound grew louder, sharper, until it filled the night and rattled through my chest. I sat frozen as one by one, police cars tore past the gas station and veered down my street. Their red and blue strobes split the darkness, bouncing off windows, turning my quiet neighborhood into something out of a nightmare. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed the phone with sweaty hands. "Dad, the police are here," I cried. "What's happening? Please, I can't take this." His answer came quick, steadier now, but heavy, as if it carried the weight of something too awful to say aloud. "Emily, I'll explain soon. Right now, I just need you safe. That's all that matters. Trust me." Tears blurred my vision. I had always trusted him, but what could possibly be so terrible that I wasn't even allowed inside my own home? From a distance, I watched more police cars screech to a stop in front of my house. Officers poured out in formation, some with flashlights cutting through the night, others with weapons raised. Their boots thundered against the pavement, radios hissing with clipped, urgent words I couldn't make out. My neighborhood, the same one I used to describe as boring, suddenly looked like a war zone. I wanted to run to them, to demand answers, to reclaim control over my own life, but my body refused to move. My hands were welded to the steering wheel, trembling violently. And in that moment, a chilling thought wrapped itself around my spine. Something inside that house could have ended me. Dad had known, somehow he had known before I even turned onto the street. As I sat there, watching from the safety of distance, a cold truth seeped in. My life was hanging by nothing more than the fragile thread of my father's warning. If I had ignored him, if I had pulled into that driveway and unlocked that door, I might not be breathing right now. Still, the not knowing was torture. What was inside? Why was I being kept away like a stranger from my own home? I gripped the phone tighter when it rang again. Dad's voice was calmer now, but not the kind of calm that soothed. It was the heavy, controlled calm of a man carrying something unbearable. "Emily, listen to me. Don't try to be brave right now. Bravery could get you killed. You staying put, that's the only reason you're safe." My throat ached. "But Dad," I whispered, "what's happening? What's inside my house?" I heard him breathing hard, like he was pacing, struggling with every word he wasn't ready to tell me. Then he spoke, slow and deliberate. "I can't say yet, not until the police clear it, but promise me, don't move until I give you the word." I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, tears slipping hot down my cheeks. I felt small, like a child again, clinging to the one person I trusted most. "I promise," I whispered. Time slowed. Every minute stretched into an hour. Through the windshield, I watched silhouettes of officers sweeping across my house, flashlights piercing through the dark, radios sparking with urgency. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The tone alone told me something was horribly wrong. Frustration bubbled beneath my fear. It was my house, my life. Why wouldn't anyone tell me what was happening? Didn't I deserve to know? My hands shook as I almost twisted the key in the ignition, ready to drive closer, ready to demand answers. I felt slipping further and further away. But before I could, my phone buzzed again. Dad's voice came through one last time, low and certain, with words that froze every drop of blood in my body. "Emily, if you had walked into that house tonight, you wouldn't be alive right now." The way he said it, not panicked, not dramatic, but certain, sent a chill so deep into my bones, I thought I'd never be warm again. He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't trying to scare me. He meant every word, and in that moment, the tears I had been trying so hard to hold back finally spilled over. My chest rose and fell in shallow bursts as I realized just how close I had come to walking straight into something I wouldn't have walked back out of. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to steady my breathing, but it was no use. Fear had hollowed me out from the inside. For the first time, I understood that this wasn't about discomfort or paranoia. This was life and death. The sirens that had once roared so loud were fading now, replaced by low murmurs, sharp bursts of radio chatter, and the heavy thump of boots across my yard. I strained to listen, but the night gave me nothing clear. Then, without warning, shouting erupted from the direction of my house. I sat up straighter, my pulse hammering in my ears, and then I saw them. 2 officers, dragging a man out of my front door. At first, he was only a shadow in their grip, his face swallowed by the night. But then the porch light caught him just enough for me to see the way he fought against them, his arms twisted behind him in handcuffs. My body went ice cold. There had been someone in my home, someone waiting. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was Mom. Her voice cracked through the speaker, brittle and frantic. "Emily, are you okay? Please, please tell me you're not near the house." "I'm at the gas station," I answered quickly, my voice shaking. "Dad told me to stay." A sob of relief rushed out of her, and I could hear her whispering a desperate prayer under her breath. Thank God, thank God. But as I looked back at the chaos unfolding, my relief curdled into something else. Police officers swarmed my lawn. More cars screamed to a stop. Neighbors in pajamas crept out of their houses, whispering, pointing, eyes wide as they tried to piece together what had happened. I had never felt so exposed in my life. My home, my sanctuary, was now the center of a spectacle, and I was still in the dark. Something shifted inside me in that moment. This wasn't about curiosity anymore. This wasn't even about fear. This was survival. Dad had always told me, instincts are everything. Trust them and they'll save you. And now, once again, his instincts had kept me alive. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand and whispered into the phone, "Okay, Dad, I'm not moving. I'll wait until you tell me it's safe." His voice softened instantly, thick with emotion. "That's all I need, Emily. Just wait. I'll come get you myself when it's over." Those words anchored me. I leaned back in my seat, still trembling, but grounded by the promise that he was coming. I didn't know what nightmare had just been dragged out of my house, but I knew one thing for certain. If I had ignored his call, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. I watched the street from a distance, lit up in frantic red and blue. Neighbors huddled together in clusters, pointing toward my yard as officers moved in and out of the house. My chest tightened as my eyes returned to the man they had in custody. Even from across the street, I could see his eyes wild, darting, dangerous. His clothes were torn, his face slick with sweat, and yet there was something deliberate about him, something unsettling that had nothing to do with desperation. This wasn't some petty thief looking for a quick score. No, this was different. I swallowed hard and whispered into the phone, "Dad, I see them. They've got someone. Who is he? What was he doing in my house?" Dad's answer came steady, but I could hear the weight in his tone. "Emily, stay calm. The police will explain soon, but I need you to understand something. You did the right thing by listening. If you had walked inside tonight, he would have been waiting for you. Waiting for me." The words echoed in my skull like a bell, sharp and deafening. This wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had been inside my house, waiting for me. Minutes later, an officer broke away from the scene and approached my car. His expression was grim, but when he saw me trembling in the driver's seat, he softened just enough. He leaned down, lowering his voice. "Miss Carter, you're safe now. We've cleared the house." I clutched the wheel tighter, my knuckles aching. Who was he? What was he doing in my home? The officer hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the scene behind him before he finally spoke. "We found evidence he wasn't there to rob you. He'd been watching you, following you. Inside, we found photographs, some printed from social media, some taken without you noticing. He had them spread across your coffee table. He had a knife hidden under your couch cushions." He exhaled, his jaw tightening. "If you had walked in tonight, we don't believe you would have walked back out." My chest constricted. My legs went numb, my vision blurred with hot tears. I shook my head as if refusing would change reality. But deep down, I knew. I had felt eyes on me before. Those late-night walks from my car, when the hairs on the back of my neck prickled, when shadows seemed to linger just a little too long. I had brushed it off, convinced myself I was paranoid, but I wasn't. I had been hunted. The officer's voice cut through my spinning thoughts. "It was your father's quick thinking that saved you. A neighbor saw him forcing your back door and called your dad first, knowing he'd get to you faster than anyone else. If you had arrived even 5 minutes earlier," he trailed off, his expression grave. "We might be telling a very different story right now." That was when the weight of it finally broke me. I sobbed, body shaking uncontrollably, as the truth crashed down. My father's voice returned in my ear, steady but full of quiet pain. "Emily, I told you to trust me. You did, and you're alive because of it. That's all that matters." I could hardly breathe. My safe little home, the place I had worked so hard to make my own, had been corrupted, violated, turned into a stage for someone else's sick obsession. I felt sick, but at the same time, beneath the fear and the grief, gratitude swelled inside me like a lifeline. If Dad hadn't called at that exact moment, if I hadn't listened, I wouldn't be here. The officers pulled the man toward one of the squad cars. As they pushed him inside, he twisted his head just enough to catch sight of me through the windshield. Our eyes met, only for a second. His stare was cold, unblinking, empty, and yet, behind that emptiness was something worse, something intentional. A violent shiver tore through me. I knew then that no matter what happened to him, this wasn't over. That image, those eyes, would haunt me. They weren't the eyes of a stranger who stumbled into the wrong house. They were the eyes of someone who had chosen me. An officer asked if I wanted to go inside, to see the evidence myself. I shook my head quickly. "Not tonight. I can't." The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt poisoned, corrupted. It felt like a trap. So I stayed at the gas station until Dad finally pulled into the lot in his old truck. The moment he stepped out and wrapped me in his arms, I collapsed against him, sobbing into his shoulder. He held me close, strong and unshakable, whispering against my hair. "You're safe now, Emily. That's all that matters." But even as his words tried to anchor me, I knew the truth. I might have been safe in that moment, but my world had been shattered. Someone had been inside, waiting for me. And the question that burned in my chest wasn't if I was safe anymore. It was why me. That night rewrote the story of my life. My father's voice on the other end of the phone, my decision to listen, and those flashing red and blue lights outside my window, all of it drew a line I could never step back over. On one side was the world I thought I knew, safe, predictable, ordinary. On the other side was reality. Danger doesn't always hide in dark alleys or unfamiliar streets. It can sit quietly, waiting for you in the very place you call home. And sometimes, the only thing that saves you is a voice strong enough, loving enough to be believed. The next morning, I woke at my parents' house, though I don't know if you could really call it sleep. My body had only managed a few restless hours, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadows of the night before. I saw the man's face, his empty stare, the way the officers dragged him across my lawn like some nightmare made flesh. When I finally stirred, the first thing I saw was my mom. She was sitting in a chair beside the bed, her body hunched with exhaustion, her face pale, her eyes raw from crying. She reached for my hand and whispered, "You scared us so badly, Emily. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't listened to your father." Her words hit me like a stone in water, rippling out until the truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just my story. It wasn't just my fear. It was theirs too. My family had been pulled into the same nightmare, and my survival had come at the price of their sleepless night. When my dad finally walked into the room, he didn't say a single word. He didn't need to. He just pulled me into his arms, holding me with a strength that came from terror as much as from love. For a long moment, we both cried silently. No explanations needed. It was the kind of hug that says everything words can't: relief, grief, and the terrifying thought of what could have been. Later, when we tried to piece together some sense of normalcy over breakfast, the phone rang. The police were calling with more details. My hands shook as I listened. The man they had arrested wasn't some petty thief looking for quick cash. He had a record, a long one. He had followed women before, he had broken into homes and waited for them, and he had been there for me, not for my jewelry, not for my wallet. For me, the detective's voice was steady, clinical, but every word made my skin crawl. He studied your routine. He knew when you worked late, when you came home, even when you usually turned out your lights. Those photos laid across your coffee table weren't just keepsakes, they were pieces of a plan. If your father hadn't acted so quickly, things could have gone very differently. My stomach twisted at the thought. Every ordinary moment I'd brushed off as paranoia, the hairs rising on the back of my neck in the parking lot, the shadow I thought I saw move when I turned my key in the door, the unease I convinced myself was just in my head, suddenly had an explanation. It hadn't been nothing. It had been him, watching, waiting. And just like that, the place I had once called home became something else entirely. Not a shelter, not a safe haven, but the stage for a trap I had almost walked right into. The detective's words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. Things could have gone very differently, and that phrase clung to me like a shadow, a reminder of how thin the line between life and death had been. I sat at my parents' kitchen table, staring at the plate of eggs my mom had placed in front of me, but I couldn't bring myself to eat. My hands were still trembling, and every sound, the creak of the old floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, made me jump. My dad sat across from me, his jaw tight, his coffee untouched. He was watching me the way he used to when I was little, like if he looked away, I might disappear. Later that afternoon, 2 officers arrived at my parents' house. They wanted me to give an official statement. Sitting in the living room, with a recorder on the coffee table, and both of them watching me closely, I felt stripped bare. My voice shook as I described the phone call, the way my dad's warning stopped me, and how I'd seen the man dragged out of my home. Every word felt surreal, like I was talking about someone else's life, not my own. When they asked if I wanted to see the photographs he'd left behind, I froze. A part of me screamed to say no, to keep that door shut forever, but another part, the part that needed to understand, made me nod. The officer slid an envelope across the table. My fingers hesitated before opening it. Inside were glossy prints, pictures of me at the grocery store, walking to my car after work, sitting in my living room with the curtains half drawn. Pictures I hadn't known were being taken. My chest tightened, bile rising in my throat. It wasn't just the images themselves, it was the realization that this stranger had been there, close enough to touch, watching me when I thought I was safe. I dropped the envelope like it burned my hands, tears blurring my vision. My mother covered her mouth with her hands, sobbing silently. My father reached for me, gripping my shoulder, steady but unsteady all at once. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest bed at my parents' house, staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing in on me. Every creak of the house made my heart race. I kept seeing his eyes, those cold, empty eyes, locked on me as the police dragged him away. I knew he was in custody. I knew he couldn't hurt me, but the fear didn't care about logic. It sank deep into me like poison. The following week was a blur of phone calls, detectives, and endless questions. I learned his name, though saying it out loud felt like giving him power. He was older than I expected, mid-30s, with a history that made my skin crawl. He had been arrested before for stalking, for breaking and entering, for harassing women who had rejected him. Each time, he had slipped through the cracks of the system with probation or short sentences. And now, he had chosen me. Not by accident, not by chance, but deliberately. The police told me I would need to testify eventually, that my statement would be crucial in keeping him locked away for good. The thought of facing him in a courtroom made my stomach turn, but I knew I didn't have a choice. If I stayed silent, if I walked away, he could do this to someone else. And that thought was worse than my fear. For days, I stayed at my parents' house, too afraid to step foot back into mine. My mom begged me to sell it, to never go back. But my dad, he was quiet. One evening, he finally spoke. "Emily," he said, his voice low but firm, "you can't let him take your home away from you. That house isn't his. It's yours. If you let the fear win, then he still has a hold on you." His words hit me like a challenge. I hated him for being right. And so, a week later, I stood on the sidewalk outside my house, with my father beside me. The yellow police tape was gone. The locks had been changed, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt tainted, hollow, like a stage where something unspeakable had almost happened. My dad squeezed my hand. "You don't have to go in today if you're not ready," he said softly. I nodded, but deep down, I knew I had to. Stepping through the front door was like walking into a stranger's home. The furniture was the same, the smell of my lavender candles still faint in the air, but the walls seemed to whisper with what could have been. I walked slowly, room by room, forcing myself to look, to see the spaces where he had been hiding. In the living room, I paused by the couch where they had found the knife. My knees went weak, and for a moment I thought I'd collapse. But then I heard my dad behind me, steady breathing grounding me. I whispered to myself, "This is my home, not his." That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time since it happened. Sleep didn't come easily. Every shadow twisted into his figure, every sound felt like footsteps. But I stayed, and that, in its own way, was a victory. But deep inside me, I knew this wasn't the end. He was behind bars, yes, but trials could take months, and fear had a way of lingering long after the danger passed. I also knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't the same person I had been before that night. I couldn't be, because once you look fear in the eyes, once you realize how close death was to your doorstep, you either break, or you learn to fight, and I wasn't going to break. I thought the nightmare had ended the moment they dragged him out of my house, but in reality that was only the beginning. Sleep became a stranger to me in the weeks that followed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, those cold, unblinking eyes staring straight at me as the officers shoved him into the back of their cruiser. My home, the place I once returned to for comfort after 12-hour shifts at the hospital, now felt like an abandoned stage where a trap had been set for me. I couldn't even bring myself to step through the front door alone. My father came with me the first time. He unlocked the door and walked inside ahead of me, flashlight in hand like we were entering enemy territory. I stood frozen on the porch, my palms sweating, my heart refusing to calm. It took me several minutes just to cross the threshold, and when I finally did, the sight of my own living room made my stomach turn. The coffee table was still there, but all I could see in my mind was the photos they said had been spread across it. My photos, me walking to work, me standing in line at the grocery store, me through the blinds of my own kitchen window. My safe place had been turned into a cage, and I was the animal being studied. The police told me he had a name, Richard Hall, 43 years old, a man with a record that made my blood run cold. This wasn't the first time. He had followed other women, slipped into their homes, waited for them. Some had escaped, some hadn't. Hearing those words made me sick, but they also lit a fire inside me. I wasn't just a victim, I was the one who got away, and because of that, I was the one who could make sure he never did it again. The trial came months later. By then, I had moved back in with my parents temporarily. My mom hovered, always asking if I was okay, while my dad stayed quieter, as if carrying the weight of his warning still on his shoulders. When the court date finally arrived, I wore my scrubs beneath a simple coat, as if reminding myself that I was more than what had happened to me. I was a nurse. I had spent years saving lives. I wasn't going to let this man take mine away in silence. Walking into the courtroom felt like walking into the fire my dad used to charge toward without hesitation. And then I saw him, Richard, sitting there in chains, his expression unreadable, his eyes still restless and searching. The moment our gazes met, I froze. He didn't look away. He didn't blink. For a second, I felt the same chill that had crawled through me that night. But then something shifted. This time, I wasn't standing alone in the shadows of my home. This time, he was the one trapped. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and sat down in the front row with my family on either side. When the prosecutor laid out the evidence, the photos, the knife, the weeks of surveillance he had done on me, I wanted to cover my ears, but I forced myself to listen. Every word was a reminder that my instincts hadn't failed me. My father's warning hadn't just saved me. It had saved countless others who might have been next. And when they asked me to take the stand, I did. My voice shook at first, but as I spoke, it grew steadier. I told the jury how I almost walked through that door, how my dad's voice was the only thing that stopped me, how I still couldn't sleep at night, because I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't listened. Richard never looked away from me as I spoke. His stare tried to silence me, but it didn't work. I spoke louder, stronger, for myself, for my family, for every woman who never got the chance to stand where I was standing. In the end, the jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. When the judge sentenced him to life in prison, I finally exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since that night. He was gone, locked away, and though the fear would never fully leave me, the power he once had over my life was broken. That night, I went back to my house with my dad by my side. The locks had been changed, the windows reinforced, the shadows still deep and heavy in the corners. But this time, when I stepped inside, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a survivor. I sat in my living room, staring at the space where those photos had once been laid out, and I whispered to myself, not anymore. My father's voice echoed in my memory. Trust me, Emily. Don't move until I say. And for the first time, I truly understood what he meant. Trust had saved me, but so had courage. The courage to stay still when every instinct told me to run forward. The courage to speak out when silence would have been easier. Life went on after that, but nothing was ever the same. I learned that danger doesn't always wear a mask or carry a weapon in plain sight. Sometimes it hides in the ordinary. Sometimes it waits in your own living room. But I also learned this: love, trust, and instinct can be stronger than fear. And because of that, I'm still here to tell this story.